Okay? Hold it right where it is. Don't move it. Don't let it move. See?
Did you know that there's a shadow government, a dark cabal of people that control everything around you that also has nothing to do with the United States government? That's right. There are people out there that control what you can do with your own money, what other people can do with money, what other people can purchase. They're called Visa and MasterCard, and perhaps American Express and Discover. You know, there are several payment card processors. But these payment card processors have an oligopoly, which is where something is run by a very small group of individuals. It's basically a monopoly with more than one person or group at the top. That's really all that an oligopoly is. So we effectively have a monopoly, especially because all of the different payment card processor companies seem to suspiciously adopt the same rules for things, despite the fact that they're different companies. Supposedly that means that you'll have different rules, and if one company's cards, if they've got some kind of rule you don't like, you can just hop over to another company that does what you would like. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And the reason why, for most people, is that most people do not get to choose whether or not they get a Visa or a MasterCard. They only get to choose, for example, what bank they want to do business with. The bank usually chooses Visa or MasterCard for you. They give you what they give you, and you're just stuck with it. So, let's review what payment processors do in case you don't already know. A payment processor, specifically payment card processors, but other companies like PayPal adopt the rules of the payment card processors because they use them to process payment cards. A payment card is where you can take that little piece of plastic with a bunch of digits on it and use that instead of cash to take money you have and give it to someone else. For example, let's say you draw some kind of comic book, and I like your work and would like to purchase your comic book. How can I do this? Well, I live in North Carolina and you live in Minnesota. So I've flown to Minnesota. That's where this car came from, White Bear Mitsubishi. But I flew to Minnesota, and it's a long flight. That's an awful long flight, and it's hundreds of dollars to get there and back. And for what? For a comic books you're selling for $10 or $20 or whatever? Not really worth it. So it would be nice if there was a way that I could give you money without having to physically meet you to hand off cash. Enter payment processors. If I want to give you money easily, then all I have to do is take that little card that the bank gave me and use those numbers and feed it into some sort of payment processor like PayPal, or give it to Western Union or Stripe or whoever, Square, you name it. With those digits, if you have a way to take my money using one of those cards, then I can give you my card info and you can take my money through the card. That's where Visa and MasterCard come in. I have a bank account full of money. You have a bank account with no money in it. You would like me to send some of that money to you so your bank account can stop being empty, you won't be a starving artist anymore, and you can afford some ramen. To do this, basically the payment card processors are given the ability to reach into my bank account, take money out on my behalf, and put it in your merchant account, Square, Stripe, whatever, or, depending on what we're doing, it could potentially just go straight to your bank account, but they are the facilitators. All they really do, though, is come to my bank and go, hey, we need $16 from this account. Okay. And they just electronically transfer it, which means some bits flip at the bank and then some bits flip at the payment card processor. Then the payment card processor goes to your bank and says, hey, we want to give $16 to this account. And so the other bank goes, okay. And they put the $16 in your account, which means some bits flip at your bank that say your balance is higher, and some bits flip at the payment card processor to say that the payment went through and that there's now no intermediate balance left. That's really it. It's just computers flipping values in a giant spreadsheet somewhere. All they do is tell your bank they want to take some money and tell the other bank they want to give that money to them. And usually they'll skim a percentage off the top. I believe they call this an interchange fee. And yes, it's a little more complicated than that, but not really all that much. The devil may be in the details, but the bottom line is what these payment card processors do is not very complicated. And frankly, it's probably not worth the amount of money that they shave off the top and make billions off of by basically skimming the entire economy. I don't know that it's worth it, but the problem is there are very few because the red tape is so brutal that good luck starting your own payment card processor. It's going to be awfully hard starting your own payment card processor. I've actually done the slightest, and boy oh boy do I mean slightest, bit of research into this. Say you wanted to, if you want to open any kind of financial institution, you literally have to have millions of dollars. Just for stuff like insurance or whatever, you have to insure funds, and it's insane. The amount of red tape is astonishing. So good luck ever starting your own. These big corporations basically have a monopoly on the ability to send money relatively painlessly from my account to your account. Now, there are ways around this. For example, the banks got together and made Zelle, but that's not really something that you can use to pay in the vast majority of places. And that's the problem. These companies, Visa and MasterCard, basically are accepted everywhere. Everything else is accepted in limited or in some places no places at all in some areas. So you're not going to be using Zelle to pay for a lot of things. You're not going to be using PayPal to pay for a lot of things. Now, granted, I can pay with PayPal at a lot of places, but I can't do it for every merchant or even most merchants. It really tends to be the big ones. Like you can pay with PayPal at Newegg, for example, but it's hit or miss whether somebody has PayPal or any of the other payment processors I refuse to use, such as Venmo, Cash App, any of those. I really don't like a lot of these alternative payment processors. And part of the reason is that they really are just sort of a front in a lot of cases for credit cards. So you use these like Cash App, for example. It's not really cash. What they're really doing in a lot of cases is just yanking the stuff from a card. Now you can add a bank account, but you know that they're still forced to abide by the Visa rules, because guess what happens? Because Visa and MasterCard are taken everywhere, everybody uses them, which means if they say, if you don't do what we want you to do, we will take away your ability to take Visa. So even if you disagree with Visa's policies, you basically have to choose between being able to accept payments from the majority of the people that would that have cards versus a much more limited market that may not have access to a non-Visa card to pay with. This is really the big problem. Visa and MasterCard, which are just payment processors, they're just take my money and hand it to this guy, which really boils down to electronically change a number in my account and this other guy's account using your computer. That's it. It's just they send a transaction over the internet, which is really just flipping two numbers so that one goes down by 16 or whatever and one goes up by 16 or whatever. That's it. That's all they do. But because you want access to all markets, to all people that have these things, You have to play by their rules. Now, it's not a problem if these companies just were like, hey, if you do something, that's on you. We're just facilitators. All we do is take money out of one person's account that wants to send money and give it to the other person that wants to receive the money. If that's all they did, we wouldn't be talking. This video wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be an issue. That's it. Unfortunately, that is not the case. For some reason, Visa and MasterCard are moral arbiters. They have this notion that they have to protect their brand. From what I don't know, because you can't really, you have to use them because they're a monopoly. Oh, protect the monopoly brand? Oh, well, I'll just go use this other payment card processor that doesn't exist. Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. But there's no brand to protect. Nobody sees that, and this is the problem. You've got entity X sees that A wants to buy something from B, and entity X either doesn't like the thing that B is selling to A, or doesn't like B, or doesn't like A, or doesn't like the industry that B is in, whatever. There's something that X doesn't like, and B is involved, and A is involved in some way. X should have no say, but Visa and MasterCard give them a say. And you can actually track all of this back to Operation Choke Point, which was an Obama-era unconstitutional operation that basically what they did was they went to banks and they said, look, we understand that we can't force you to stop people from paying for guns or adult material or any other number of industries that the Obama administration just happens not to like. But even though we can't make you stop facilitating these transactions, if you do facilitate these transactions, we are going to put you under severely heightened scrutiny. You can rest assured that you will be seeing a drastic increase in fines and fees because we're going to be watching you really closely, and everybody makes mistakes. So they took legal industries in the United States and basically made banks terrified of having anything to do with those industries. This was primarily targeted at gun sales because Obama didn't like guns, and the whole administration just anti-gun. So they do this thing to stop gun sellers and gun buyers from being able to legally transact with one another. It was ruled unconstitutional much later by the Supreme Court. The problem is the groundwork has already been laid. Now banks know, they've been on notice for 12 whatever years, that if you participate in these industries in any way, there's a good chance the government could come after you. And even though they didn't ultimately manage to really do anything because it was unconstitutional and it was ruled such, even though they can't legally do anything, the risk exists. The risk was not on our radar, and now the risk is very much on our radar. They basically bullied the banks, and the banks don't just forget that. I don't know if this is the exact reason why Visa and MasterCard have decided that, for example, erotic novels and adult content are something that they should police, but the bottom line is they shouldn't. If it's legal in the place where you are transacting, they should be forced to facilitate the transaction. And I'm not kidding when I say forced. If you choose to operate a payment processing company of any sort in the United States or elsewhere, but I'm in the United States, so elsewhere isn't as big of a concern for me. But I wish everywhere would implement this into law, that all payment card processors, all payment facilitators of any sort, must facilitate all legal transactions. There can be no discrimination based on transactions. Customers cannot be rejected from participating based on what they're transacting, based on who they're doing business with. If it's legal, the companies have to facilitate it. If they don't want to facilitate legal transactions through their payment processing platform, then they can't just ban you. They can't just cut you off. You would have to be doing something like committing fraud. So you'd have to actually be breaking the law for them to be able to dump you. And I've actually said this in a much older video that didn't get much traction because I was a much smaller channel back then, called FIPNA, F-I-P-N-A. Go look that up and you can watch what I had to say about it before, but it's largely the same thing. I want to see card companies and PayPal and Cash App, Venmo, Square, Stripe, you name it. If they take money from my account and give it to someone else who I'm trying to send the money to, they should not be allowed under any circumstances, assuming that it is legal, to do anything to stop that transaction from occurring. Because what has happened is now you have credit card companies, you have these big credit card processors acting as moral arbiters of society, operating in the shadows. The reason people don't talk about it, the reason you don't hear more about it, is that this does not work in the way that government censorship works. If the government comes around and says, you're not allowed to say that, or you're not allowed to sell that, or we're gonna drag you to criminal court for trying to, sell these adult videos or whatever. Well, that's a public case involving a government, and people typically pay a lot more attention to stuff that's abusive coming from their government. But this is not the government. This is a pair of companies that are privately owned, that answer to basically no one, that are unelected, but acting to control the behavior of entire societies. They literally can stop entire categories of businesses from existing in societies simply by going, well, we don't like those kind of businesses, so we're just going to not allow those businesses to sell things to the customers that want to buy things from them. And there's no recourse. If I, right now, wanted to purchase, let's continue with the adult example. Let's say I wanted to purchase a Playboy magazine, right? Let's say that someone sold reprints of vintage Playboys. Well, if I want to go buy those, then who are these card people to say that I can't? But they can. They literally can go, well, we don't like people who sell adult content, so you cannot do that. But they don't do it directly. See, they get Stripe or Square or PayPal or whoever, Clover, you name it, whoever it is that the person selling the vintage Playboys, whoever they use to get the money from me, to basically me hand my payment card information over so that the money can be sent to them from my account. Whoever is the facilitator, they adopt the rules of the card companies. Even if it's a bank-to-bank transaction and the card companies aren't involved in it, they still adopt the rules because the card companies say, hey, Square, your primary business is credit card transactions, right? Square's a bad example. I don't think you can do bank-to-bank with Square. PayPal, you do most of your business with credit card numbers. We are the facilitators for that. So PayPal, if you let people sell Playboys through anybody who uses PayPal, if you allow Playboys to be sold, then we will pull your ability to take credit cards, which basically means you lose 80% of your ability to make money overnight. What do you think PayPal's going to do? Now it's part of PayPal's policies. Now what happens if I want to buy these Playboys and Homeboy wants to sell me the Playboys, right? What do you think happens? It's a good question, isn't it? What happens? If PayPal blocks me, or rather PayPal would cut them off, and they would lose their ability to use their PayPal account, which means that they no longer can transact at all. And if they can't transact, then they just go out of business, because how are they going to get their money? And the thing is that they don't have the option to go, well, we can just bypass the banks and instead of, or bypass the card companies and just use a bank-to-bank transfer or whatever. But most people can't do that. Most people have a Visa or MasterCard in their pocket, not a wire transfer account thing, whatever, authorization, blah, blah, blah. They can't, it's not as simple. It's not as easy. It makes things difficult pretty quick. And they have to abide by the card processor stuff because the card processor says so. What are they going to do? So we're in a situation where these dark, shady cabals are insulated from lawsuits because now it's PayPal you'd have to sue, not the card company that actually forced PayPal to adopt these things. And the worst part is that PayPal won't even tell you that Visa and MasterCard is why they have those rules. They will not be honest about it. None of these places that adopt these Visa or MasterCard moral arbitration or moral authority crap rules, none of them actually say, oh, well, we're forced to do this by Visa or MasterCard or whoever. So it's very well hidden, and you can't just go after them directly because the party that is harming you, the party that's blocking your transaction is doing it on their behalf. But that means that it's not the card companies doing it. And the card companies, if you come after them, they'll just be like, why aren't you taking this up with PayPal? It's a PayPal problem. It's not our problem. We're not stopping you, even though they are. No, we're not stopping you. You don't have a case because we are not the party that's blocking the transaction. PayPal is. So you can kind of see how this devolves into the classic customer service. Well, let me transfer you to this department. Let me transfer you to this other department. And then you find out, well, but I was just transferred from that department. And each department points the fingers at the other department. And it's not our fault, it's the other guy's fault. Which means nobody's actually held accountable. The bottom line is if I could wave my hand and fix this with one fell swoop, I would either A, get legislation that forces payment processors to facilitate all payments that attempt to go through them unless they are blatantly illegal, or B, I want to see Visa and MasterCard shut down forever. I want payment card processors to be shut down forever, and we find another way that does not rely on these people that have decided that they have some kind of authority. No, you don't. If I have money and I want to give someone else money in exchange for goods or services, then your only job is to take my money and give it to them. And take your little cut off the top for facilitating the transaction, because I know the costs are not zero, but they are negligible per transaction. So your 3% cut's still ridiculous, but just take my money and shut up. Take the money out of my account, skim a little bit off the top, keep your little, give the rest of the money to the guy I'm trying to send the money to, and shut your mouth, Visa and MasterCard and all the other payment processors. Shut your mouth, take my money, give it to the guy I'm trying to buy stuff from. That's your job. Do your job. It's not that hard. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Take care.